Prince Thrennial had seen many blasphemies in his 3 centuries of life, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of humans wearing his ancestors. The battlefield turned workshop sprawled before him like a butcher's fever dream, where once proud elven warriors had fallen defending the Silverwood Passage, now sat a ramshackle operation of tents, forges, and, his stomach turned, processing stations. Humans scurried between the workstations, hauling cartloads of what could only be elven remains. "Sweet singing stars," Thrennial whispered, his hand moving to his blade. "They're harvesting us." The nearest human, a girl who couldn't have seen more than 16 summers, looked up from her work. She wore armor unlike anything in the royal archives. Sleek white plates that seemed to flow like water frozen mid-pore. Joints articulated with copper wire and leather. The armor gleamed with an inner light that Thrennial recognized with dawning horror. Marrowlight. The sacred glow of elven bone. "Aye!" the girl called out, hefting a warhammer that should have been too heavy for her frame. "We've got a live one!" Thrennial drew his blade in one fluid motion, the steel singing its fury. "Defilers! Grave robbers! You dare!" The girl moved. Not with the clumsy enthusiasm of human soldiers he'd faced before, but with a speed that made his eyes water. The bone armor seemed to anticipate her movements, plate sliding and locking with mechanical precision. Her hammer caught his blade mid-swing, and the impact sent him skidding back through the mud. "Name's Kit," she said conversationally, twirling the hammer like it weighed nothing. "And technically, we're recyclers, not grave robbers." Thrennial snarled and launched himself forward, calling upon centuries of training. His blade danced through forms that had been perfected when humans still thought fire was magic. Kit met him strike for strike, her armor compensating for her lack of experience with raw, enhanced power. "This is impossible," he panted between strikes. "That armor's an abomination." "This armor," Kit grunted, catching his blade between 2 gauntleted hands, "is the only reason there's anyone left to be offended." She twisted, and his ancestral sword snapped like a dry twig. The fight ended with Thrennial face down in the mud, Kit's boot on his back, and the disturbing realization that he'd been beaten by a child wearing his great-uncle's ribcage. "Right then," Kit said cheerfully. "Let's get you sorted. Jasper, we need the fancy restraints." The Bone Rights, as Thrennial learned they called themselves, were not what he'd expected. Their camp wasn't a den of necromantic horror, but a desperate refugee settlement. Children played between the tents while their parents worked the forges. The sick and wounded lay in clean medical tents, tended by healers who mixed elven bone powder into their poultices with practiced efficiency. Near the medical tent, he watched a healer mix the gleaming powder into a salve and apply it to a crying child's burns. The screaming stopped. The child's mother wept with relief. Thrennial felt his disgust war with a strange, unwelcome flicker of rightness. In a corner workshop, a scrawny human with wild eyes hunched over a vat of bubbling gray sludge. "I almost got it," he muttered to anyone who passed. "I just need to get the lattice to hold. We can't rely on old battlefields forever." 27 dead in the last Titan attack, explained Hollis, the group's leader, a weathered woman with burn scars covering half her face, and a prosthetic leg made from what looked suspiciously like elven femur. "Would have been the whole settlement if Kit hadn't held the bridge in her new armor." Thrennial sat in his cage, welded from salvaged elven weapons, adding insult to injury, and tried to maintain his royal composure. "You speak of Titans as if they still exist. The Titan War ended 500 years ago." "Did they now?" Hollis pulled out a leather journal and flipped to a sketch. "Then, what would you like to call this?" The drawing showed something that hurt to look at. A fusion of flesh and stone. Multiple limbs bent at impossible angles, Faces, plural, always plural, frozen in eternal screams. Thoreniel's blood chilled. That's not possible. The flesh forges were destroyed. The Senate ordered a lot of things, Kit interrupted, returning from patrol. Her armor was splattered with something black and viscous. Didn't stop your fancy lords from keeping a few forges running on the quiet. Experimental research, they called it. She tossed something at his feet. An elven military seal, half melted but still recognizable. House Silverpeak, his mother's cousins. We found this in the belly of the last Titan, Kit said, along with about 30 other house seals. Seems your nobles got bored of regular warfare, decided to bring back the classics. Thoreniel stared at the seal, his worldview cracking like ice in spring. But the bone armor. Surely there must be another way to fight them? You'd think, wouldn't you? Hollis laughed bitterly. First settlement that encountered a Titan tried conventional weapons. The Titan absorbed the iron, grew armor of its own. Second settlement had a wizard. Poor bastard's spells just made it stronger. But then we found the Silverwood battlefield. She gestured to her scarred face. I was a part of the salvage crew. Desperate, starving, looking for anything to trade. Found an elven corpse so old the armor had fused with the bones. When the next Titan came, I threw everything we had at it. Nothing. Then, in desperation, I grabbed that old elven breastplate. Her eyes went distant. The Titan's claw should have torn right through me. Instead, the bone held. More than held, it pushed back. The marrow in your bones, Prince, it doesn't just store magic, it processes it, refines it, turns raw power into something pure, something even Titans can't corrupt. So, you started harvesting, Thoreniel said quietly. We started surviving, Hollis corrected. Your dead were doing more to protect humanity than your living ever did. Before Thoreniel could respond, the ground shook. Then again. Then a third time with the rhythm of colossal footsteps. Titan! Someone screamed. Western approach! Kit was already moving, her armor flowing into battle configuration. How's your moral superiority holding up, Prince? 'Cause in about 30 seconds, you're gonna have to choose between your principles and your pulse. Through the cage bars, Thoreniel saw it crest the hill. It had been elven once. He could see traces of uniform in the flesh that bubbled and reformed with each step. Arms sprouted from its torso like branches, each ending in weapons of bone and sinew. Its faces, 3 of them, all screaming silently, tracked multiple targets at once. The bone rights mobilized with practiced efficiency. Fighters in bone armor formed a line while others evacuated the wounded. Kit stood at the front, hammer ready, 17 years old and prepared to fight a nightmare. Let me out, Thoreniel heard himself say. Hollis raised an eyebrow. Gonna run? No. He watched the Titan tear a tree from the ground and hurl it at the defensive line. Kit dodged, but barely. I'm going to fight. In what? We broke your fancy sword, remember? Then give me armor. The words tasted like ashes. Give me bone. Hollis studied him for a long moment while the battle raged. Then she smiled. A sharp, dangerous thing. Jasper, get the prince fitted. Looks like we're about to see if royal marrow runs as hot as common. The armor was still warm when they strapped it on. Previous owner was Matthias, Kit explained rapidly, helping adjust the chest piece. Good fighter. Titan got him yesterday. He'd be honored. Well, he'd probably laugh his ass off, actually. Matthias loved irony. Thoreniel tried not to think about wearing a man who'd been alive yesterday. The armor was different from his royal plate. Lighter, more flexible. Each piece connected by an intricate network of copper channels that pulsed with marrowlight. For a moment, he remembered the burned child in the medical tent. How the bone powder had stopped her pain, Matthias' sacrifice. continuing even after death. Protection given freely, without ceremony or conditions. His hand steadied. "The copper distributes the magic," Kit said, noticing his gaze. "My design. Prevents overload in any one piece. Also means if a section breaks, the rest keeps functioning." "You designed this?" He flexed experimentally. The armor moved like silk. "What, you think humans just grunt and hit things?" She handed him a blade, steel core wrapped in bone. "We've had maybe 10 years to reverse engineer millennia of Elven magic. We improvise." The Titan's roar shook dust from the tent ceiling. "Quick tutorial," Kit said, leading him outside. "The armor responds to intent, not commands. Don't think about moving, just move. The marrow does the rest. It'll make you faster, stronger, but it's not infinite. Push too hard, and you'll burn through the reserves." "How do I know when—" "You'll know," she grinned. "Usually right before you pass out." They charged into battle side by side. The last prince of a dying empire and a teenage girl who'd learned warfare by necessity. The Titan loomed above them, a mountain of corrupted flesh that defied nature's laws. The Rennial's first swing should have been awkward, unfamiliar. Instead, the armor sang with him, each movement flowing into the next with impossible grace. His blade carved through one of the Titan's grasping arms, the bone edge parting corrupted flesh like paper. "Not bad for a first-timer," Kit called, using her hammer to cave in what might have been a knee. "Watch the left!" A massive fist caught the Rennial in the chest, sending him flying. He should have been dead. Instead, the armor distributed the impact across every plate, channels flaring as they converted kinetic energy into heat that dissipated through the copper network. He landed on his feet, impossibly, and realized he was grinning. "Matthias likes ya," Kit laughed, dancing between the Titan's strikes. "Or maybe that's just the concussion talking." They fought like that for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Kit with her improvised style that was all momentum and controlled chaos. The Rennial with centuries of technique, suddenly amplified beyond anything he'd imagined. Other bone rights joined them, each warrior's armor glowing as they turned death into defiance. The Titan began to falter. Where its flesh tried to regenerate, the bone weapons left wounds that wouldn't close. It stumbled, fell to one knee, and Kit saw her chance. "Boost me!" she yelled. The Rennial didn't think, just moved. His hands caught her boots as she jumped, and he threw her with all the strength the armor could give. She soared impossibly high, hammer raised, and brought it down directly between the Titan's three faces. The sound was like thunder. The Titan's skull caved inward, corruption pouring out like tar. It swayed, moaned with voices that weren't quite human anymore, and finally collapsed. In the sudden silence, the Rennial could hear his own breathing, harsh inside the helmet. Around him, the bone rights were already moving, checking wounded, salvaging what they could from the Titan's corpse, preparing for the next attack. "So," Kit said, pulling off her helmet to reveal a face streaked with soot and split by a mad grin. "Still think we're grave robbers?" The Rennial removed his own helmet, feeling the cool air on his sweat-soaked face. "I think," he said slowly, "that I've been asking the wrong questions." "Ah, and what's the right question?" He looked at the fallen Titan, at the camp full of humans who'd survived the impossible, at the girl who'd beaten him with the bones of his ancestors and then trusted him enough to fight beside her. "The right question," he said, "is how do we stop more of these things from being made?" Kit's grin widened. "Nah, you're talking sense. Come on, Prince. Hollis is gonna want to hear this. And someone's gonna need to explain to you why the pale furnace is still burning." As they walked back to camp, the Rennial tried to reconcile what he'd just experienced with everything he'd been taught. The armor should have felt like a violation, a desecration of the sacred. Instead, it had felt like coming home. Maybe that was the real blasphemy. Not that humans had found a way to use elven bones, but that his own people had forgotten what they were for. Protection. Not just of the elite, but of anyone who needed it, even if they were human. "Again!" Kit commanded, and Thorunniel found himself flat on his back for the dozenth time that morning. The training yard, a cleared space between tents marked by rope and salvaged shields, had become his second home over the past week. Every morning, Kit put him through paces that would have shamed the Royal Guard's training masters. Not because they were complex, but because they were devastatingly practical. "You're still thinking like you're wearing ceremony armor," she said, offering a hand up. "All that flourishing might look pretty in a throne room, but out here, that's just extra seconds for something to eat your face." Thorunniel accepted the help, his bone armor clicking as he stood. Matthias's armor had been adjusted to fit him properly now, the copper channels rerouted by a mad genius of a tinker named Felix, who treated Marrowlight like a plumbing problem. 3 centuries of muscle memory doesn't just vanish, Thorunniel protested. "Sure it does. Watch." Kit reset her stance now, low, centered, hammer held like an extension of her arms. "Your royal fighting assumes you'll always have the advantage. Higher ground, better equipment, time to prepare. We assume everything's already gone to shit, and we're playing catch-up." She moved, and this time Thorunniel saw it coming. He dropped the ceremonial guard, let the armor guide him into a street fighter's crouch, and met her charge with his shoulder. The impact rang through the camp, and Kit actually stumbled. "Better!" She beamed like he'd given her a gift. "See? You're not fighting the armor anymore." "It felt like I was wrestling a bear." "Flatterer. Come on. Hollis wants to show you something depressing." They found the Boneright leader in what she generously called the archive, a leather tent filled with salvaged books, stolen military documents, and the accumulated knowledge of desperate people trying to understand weapons they'd never been meant to wield. Our pet prince." Hollis didn't look up from the map she was studying. "How's the existential crisis?" "Manageable," Thorunniel replied, "though I could do with fewer jokes about being house-trained." "You pissed on our hospitality when you showed up swinging. What did you expect?" She finally looked at him, and her expression was grim. "We've confirmed it. The Pale Furnace isn't just active. It's expanding operations." She spread out reconnaissance sketches on the table. Thorunniel's blood chilled as he recognized the location. The Moonwell Valley, sacred site of his people, now corrupted into something obscene. The sketches showed new construction, smokestacks belching black fog, and figures that might have been soldiers or might have been something worse. "My scouts report they're not just making titans anymore," Hollis continued. "They're making something new, smaller, faster, and they're using live subjects." "Volunteers from the border villages have been disappearing," Kit added quietly. "Whole families. Gone overnight. The locals think it's raiders." "It's not." Thorunniel traced the defensive positions on the map, his mind calculating angles of attack despite his horror. "This is Commander Lord Valeth's work. I recognize the control patterns." "Friend of yours?" "My teacher. He believed the Titan Project was the key to Elven supremacy. The Senate officially censured him, but..." He gestured at the evidence. Clearly, that was theater. "Well, shit." Kit leaned over the map. "So, we're not just fighting rogue war crimes, we're fighting organized war crimes. My favorites." "There's more." Hollis pulled out another document. A letter on official Elven stationery, seal intact. "We intercepted this from a courier. They're planning something big. A demonstration of renewed might for the autumn equinox. That's 3 weeks away." Thorunniel read the letter, each word another nail in his homeland's coffin. Mass deployment. Shock and awe. Acceptable losses. The language of generals who'd forgotten what they were supposed to protect. "We need to hit the furnace," he said. "Now. Before they're ready." "With what army?" Hollis laughed bitterly. We got maybe 40 fighters in bone armor. Half of them still learning which end of a sword is sharp. The furnace has actual soldiers, defensive positions, and whatever nightmares they are cooking up in there. Then we need allies. Oh, certainly. I'll just put out a call. Wanted. Warriors willing to assault an elven stronghold wearing the bones of their enemies. That'll go over well. Actually, Kit said slowly, that might work better than you think. Felix, show him what came in this morning. The tinker, a scrawny human with burn-scarred hands and wild eyes, produced the letter from his collection of pouches. Border town called Mailhaven. They heard about us. Want to trade food and salvage rights for protection. And? Hollis prompted. And they've got 36 fighters willing to learn. Lost too many people to say no to bone armor anymore. The taboo is breaking, the Rennial realized. Necessity overrides revulsion. Pretty words, Hollis said. But 36 farmers with bone scraps won't crack the furnace. No, but they might convince others. The Rennial's mind raced. What about the exile communities? Elves who refuse to support the war? Most of them want nothing to do with humans or bones. Most, not all. He turned to Kit. You mentioned forest witches yesterday. The daughters of Root and Remedy, she confirmed. They've been neutral so far, but they hate the furnace. It's poisoning their groves. And the mountain clans. Which ones? The dwarves who think we're all insane, or the elves who think we're blasphemers? Both. Give me 2 weeks and a small escort. I'll bring you your army. Hollis studied him like he was a puzzle with missing pieces. And why would the last prince of the Silver Court help humans destroy his own people's weapons? Because they're not my people's weapons, the Rennial said firmly. They're abominations, wearing my people's faces. And because... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound hollow. Because Kit was right. The armor isn't about death, it's about protection. And right now, you're the only ones using it correctly. Pretty speech. Hollis stood, decision made. Kit, take 4 fighters and go with him. Try not to let anyone murder our pet prince. I'll do my best, but no promises. He's very murderable. The first stop was the Thornwood, where the daughters of Root and Remedy made their home among trees old enough to remember when the elves were young. Kit had never been this deep into elven lands, and she kept her helmet on despite the peaceful surroundings. Relax, the Rennial told her as they approached the grove. The daughters are healers. Healers with a body count, Kit muttered. Everyone knows what happened to the last army that tried to conscript them. They turned into trees. Very lovely trees, with screaming faces in the bark. Not helping the relaxation. The eldest daughter met them at the grove's edge. A woman so old she'd passed through ancient and into something else entirely. Her eyes were the green of deep forests, and when she smiled, roots shifted beneath the earth. Prince Thoreniel, she said, voice like wind through leaves. Wearing human armor made from elven bones. How delightfully circular. Eldest Morwyn. He bowed as deeply as the armor allowed. I come seeking aid against the pale furnace. I know why you're here. The trees whisper of corruption, spreading from the Moonwell. The question is why I should care about human wars. Because it's not a human war, Kit interrupted, then caught herself. Your eldestness. Morwen's laugh was like birds taking flight. Such manners from one wearing my nephew's ribcage. Speak, child. Kit pulled off her helmet, revealing her soot-stained face and determined eyes. The Titans don't care about borders. Neither does the poison from the furnace. You can stay neutral, but neutral ground's shrinking fast. And you propose we join your bone-wearing rebels? I propose you join the people trying to stop more kids from becoming orphans. Kit's voice hardened. Human, elven, whatever. Dead is dead. The eldest studied her for a long moment. Then she looked at Thrennial. You vouch for these humans? With my life. How generous, considering they already own it. She gestured, and other daughters emerged from the trees. Women of various ages, all carrying the indefinable weight of power. We will not wear bone armor, but we will fight. Our magic can contain corruption, prevent regeneration. You'll need that at the furnace. Thank you, Thrennial began, but she raised a hand. Don't thank me yet. The price for our aid is truth. Full disclosure about what the furnace is creating. No royal secrets, no noble lies. Thrennial hesitated. Some of those secrets could destroy what was left of Elven civilization. Then he looked at Kit, patient in her borrowed bones, and decided civilization was already destroyed. What mattered now was what they built from the pieces. Agreed, he said, and felt another chain of his old life snap. The dwarven response was more direct. "Oh, fuck off," said Clan Chief Grimvar, not looking up from his forge. "No offense." "None taken," Kit replied cheerfully. "Counter-offer. What if we fuck off with a wagon full of pure mithril?" The hammer paused mid-swing. "You don't have pure mithril." "Not yet." She produced a map. "But we know where House Silverpeak was storing their emergency reserves. Shame if something happened to it during our assault on the furnace." "That's theft." "That's compensation. You help us, you get paid. Very traditional." Grimvar finally looked at them, taking in Thrennial's presence with raised eyebrows. And the prince is fine with robbing his own treasury?" "The prince is fine with paying fair wages for necessary work," Thrennial said carefully. "Besides, House Silverpeak forfeited their honor when they reopened the furnace. Their gold is tainted." "Gold's gold, boy. Doesn't taint." The dwarf considered. "But mithril? How much are we talking?" £40, minimum." "Bullshit!" Kit shrugged. "Come with us and find out. I'll stay here and keep making horseshoes while the world burns." "Your choice." The negotiations took 3 more hours and involved quantities of ale that would have killed someone not wearing enhancement armor. But eventually they had their dwarven contingent. Not warriors, but engineers, who could crack the furnace's defenses, and smiths who could maintain bone armor in the field. "I still think you're all mad," Grimvar declared as they prepared to leave. "But profitable mad is the best kind." The final recruitment was the hardest. The Elven exile community of Haven's Rest had survived by wanting nothing to do with either the Empire or its enemies. They'd built a life of rigid simplicity, and Thrennial's presence, and human company, wearing bone armor, was like bringing the plague to their doorstep. "Leave," Commander Sereth said flatly. She'd served with Thrennial's father, had taught him swordplay as a child. Now she looked at him like something scraped off a boot. "You're not welcome here." "Sarah, that's Commander to you, Oathbreaker." Kit stepped forward, but Thrennial caught her arm. This was his fight. "I broke no oaths," he said quietly. "I upheld them. Protection of the innocent. Defense of the realm. Justice for all citizens. Every oath I took as a prince, I'm fulfilling. By wearing the dead? By allying with grave robbers? By fighting the real grave robbers." His voice rose, carrying across the gathered crowd. "The ones who dig up our honored dead to make monsters. The ones who turn our legacy into weapons of conquest. I've seen the Titans, Sereth. I've seen what Valeth is building, and I've seen humans. Humans treating our bones with more respect than our own lords." "Pretty words from pretty prince," someone called out. But you're asking us to fight our own people. I'm asking you to fight for our people, the Renial countered. For the idea that we are more than conquerors, that our bones could protect instead of destroy. Silence stretched. Then, from the back of the crowd, a young elf stepped forward. Barely past his first century, holding a practiced sword like it was made of hope. I'll go, he said. My sister disappeared near the Moonwell last month. If there's a chance she's still alive. Calum, no, Sereth began, but others were already stepping forward. Veterans who'd seen too much. Youngsters who'd lost too much. Exiles who decided that some causes were worth breaking exile for. In the end, they had 24 volunteers, not many, but each one worth 10 ordinary soldiers. Sereth herself remained behind, but as the Renial left, she caught his arm. Don't make me regret not stopping you, she said quietly, and bring them home, if you can. All of them, he promised, knowing it was a lie, but needing to say it anyway. They returned to the Bonewright camp to find it transformed. The new recruits from Millhaven were training in basic armor, their movements clumsy but determined. Felix had established a proper workshop, copper channels glowing, as he modified armor for different body types. The daughters had set up a medical station that actually looked medical, instead of like a battlefield surgery. And in the center of it all, Hollis stood with an expression that promised news. Good timing, she said. Remember those furnace couriers we've been intercepting? Their messages are getting interesting. She showed them a partially decoded document. Projects consumption exceeds projections. Commander Valeth ignores warnings. Someone inside is getting nervous. Internal dissent. The Renial studied the message. Valeth always did inspire more fear than loyalty. Which brings us to our visitor, Hollis continued, gesturing to a tent. Someone who wants to buy our services. Seems those warnings weren't heeded. We're not mercenaries, Kit protested. No, but he's offering something better than gold. Hollis gestured to a tent. Information. Seems Lord Commander Valeth has made enemies among his own ranks. Inside the tent sat an elf in traveling clothes, face hidden by a deep hood. When he looked up, the Renial's breath caught. Hello, cousin, said Lysander Silverpeak, and his smile was sharp as winter. I hear you're in the market for furnace secrets. What would you say to complete architectural plans and patrol schedules? I'd say you're planning betrayal, the Renial replied carefully. Betrayal? Lysander laughed. My dear cousin, I'm planning survival. Valeth's gone mad. He's not building weapons anymore, he's building gods. And gods, as our histories show, have a bad habit of eating their creators. He produced a leather portfolio, thick with documents. Everything you need to crack the furnace. Guard rotations, weak points, even the activation codes for the emergency containment. In exchange for? Safe passage out. New identity and... His smile faltered. And you stop what's growing in the deep chambers. Because if you don't, there won't be a world left for anyone to rule. Kit took the portfolio, flipping through with practiced efficiency. Her face paled. These specifications, they're not making Titans anymore. They're making something else. Something with wings. Dragons, Lysander confirmed. Or near enough. Flesh-forged dragons powered by concentrated marrow. Valeth plans to unleash them at the Equinox demonstration. 3 of them. Fully grown, utterly obedient. 3 dragons could level a city, the Renial said quietly. 3 dragons could level a kingdom, which is rather the point. Lysander stood. So, do we have a deal? The Renial looked at Kit, at Hollis, at the impossible alliance they'd built from necessity and hope. Then he held out his hand. "We have a deal. But if you betray us, if I betray you, we all die anyway." Lysander shook hands, sealing the pact. "I'll be in touch with updates. Try not to die before the equinox. It'd be terribly inconvenient." After he left, they spread out the plans, and the weight of what they faced settled over them like a shroud. The furnace wasn't just a fortress. It was a factory of nightmares, defended by soldiers who'd willingly fuse themselves with their armor, becoming more weapon than person.
"Well,"
Kit said eventually,
"at least it's not boring."
"I'm beginning to miss boring," Thrennial admitted.
"Too late for that now, Prince."
Hollis rolled up the plans.
"You wanted an army? You got one. Farmers and exiles and mad witches and greedy dwarves. Time to see if it's enough."
"It's not," Thrennial said bluntly. "But it's what we have. And humans, I've learned, have a talent for making not enough work anyway."
Kit grinned. "Now you're getting it. Come on, we got 2 weeks to turn this mess into something that can crack the pale furnace. Better get started."
As they left to begin preparations, Thrennial touched the bone armor he wore. Matthias's gift. Humanity's innovation. The future built from the past. Somewhere, beneath the Moonwell, dragons were being born from flesh and sorrow. But here, in this camp of desperate hope, something else was being forged. An alliance that shouldn't exist. A weapon made from trust instead of bone. Maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. The pale furnace squatted in the Moonwell Valley like a cancer made of stone and iron. What had once been sacred ground now reeked of sulfur and worse things. The kind of smells that came from rendering flesh into purpose. Kit lay flat on the ridge, watching through a spyglass while Thrennial consulted Lysander's maps one final time. Below them, their impossible army made final preparations. Daughters of Root and Remedy painted ward symbols on bone armor. Dwarven engineers checked their demolition charges. Elven exiles prayed to ancestors who might not be listening anymore. Human bone rights just checked their weapons and tried not to think about the odds. 3 entry points, Thrennial murmured. Main gate's a death trap, but the waste tunnels are full of toxic runoff that'll melt unprotected flesh? Kit finished. And the wall breach near the east tower? Guarded by what Lysander calls flesh sentinels. Ex-soldiers who volunteered to be permanently fused with Titan remains.
Fantastic! I love options where all of them are terrible.
She lowered the spyglass.
How's your crisis of conscience? Last chance to back out.
I passed the last chance about 50 moral compromises ago. He managed a wan smile. Besides, someone has to keep you from doing something stupidly heroic.
That's rich. Coming from Prince, I'll personally duel my evil mentor to save the world.
That's the plan, is it?
That's always the plan. Evil mentors love a good duel. Makes them feel important, while I sneak past and blow things up.
A whistle from below. 3 short, 1 long. Time to move. They slid down to where Hollis waited with the strike team leaders. The Bone-Right commander had traded her usual practical leathers for full armor, a masterwork of human engineering and elven bone that made her look like Death's own general. Lysander's distraction should hit in 10 minutes, she said without preamble. Supply convoy coming from the south. When that garrison moves to intercept, we go. Team 1 takes the waste tunnels.
Lucky us,
Felix muttered, his engineering crew loaded down with protective gear and explosives. Team 2 hits the wall breach. Draw attention, make noise. Die gloriously if necessary, but preferably not. Team 3, that's you, Kit, goes over the north wall during the chaos.
Into the heart of the furnace, Kit confirmed. Find the dragons, stop the dragons, try not to become dragon food.
Thrennial goes with Team 2, Hollis continued. You're the best chance of breaking through the sentinels. Actually, Thrennial said quietly, I need to go with Kit. That wasn't the plan. Beowulf will be with the dragons. He won't trust anyone else with his master work. His jaw tightened. And there are command phrases. Old military codes from the Titan Wars. If he's using the original frameworks, I might be able to disrupt them. Might, Hollis said flatly. Better than nothing. She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. Calum, take field command of Team 2. Try not to die, Prince. We need you for the victory speeches.
Assuming there's a victory, someone muttered. There will be, Kit said firmly, 'cause the alternative is dragonfire death for everyone we care about, and that's terribly motivating. Thunder rolled across the valley, not from the sky, but from the south. The supply convoy distraction had begun. Through the gathering dusk, they could see the furnace soldiers scrambling to defensive positions. That's our cue, Hollis barked. Teams, move! For the living and the dead! For the living and the dead! The army roared back, and they were running. The waste tunnels were worse than advertised. Felix's team slogged through knee-deep toxic sludge that hissed and bubbled against their protective gear. The bone armor helped. Marrow light seemed to repel the worst of the corruption, but the smell alone was enough to drop a horse. Why? One of his engineers gasped. Is it moving? Don't think about it, Felix advised. Also, don't touch the walls. Or the ceiling. Or each other, actually. Just don't touch anything. They planted charges as they went, following the mapped route toward the furnace's foundation. The plan was simple. Blow the support structures, bring down the containment chambers. Pray the dragons weren't complete enough to survive. Movement ahead, someone hissed. Felix raised a hand, and the team froze. Through the murk, something that might have once been human shambled past. Its flesh had the consistency of melted wax, and things that weren't quite eyes swept the tunnel. Cleaner construct, Felix breathed. Lysander mentioned them. They maintain the tunnels by absorbing the waste into themselves. That's horrific. That's efficiency. Don't let it touch you. They waited, breaths held until the thing passed. Then continued their grim work, placing charges with hands that shook from more than exertion. Team 2 hit the wall breach like a hammer on glass. Calum led the charge, the young elf fighting with desperate fury. The flesh sentinels were nightmares given form. Soldiers whose bodies had been opened up and stuffed with titan parts until they were more weapon than person. They moved with jerky precision, felt no pain, and regenerated from wounds that should have been fatal. Form up! Sereth's veterans created a spear wall, bone weapons gleaming. Remember your training. They're strong, but stupid. A sentinel grabbed an exile warrior, lifting him one-handed. Before it could strike, 3 spears punched through its torso. It looked down at the weapons with something like curiosity, then pulled itself forward along the shafts to reach its attackers. Cut the head! Calum screamed. It's the only! The daughter struck. Vines erupted from the earth, wrapping around sentinel limbs with crushing force. Where the plants touched corrupted flesh, both withered. But the vines grew faster than the corruption could spread. Now! Morwen commanded. The warriors struck, taking heads while the sentinels were bound. It was brutal, ugly work, but it opened up the breach. Inside! Calum led the push. Hold the entrance! They poured through, meeting furnace soldiers who were still human enough to feel fear. The battle in the courtyard was chaos. Bone against steel, magic against mad science, and desperate hope against calculating cruelty. Kit and Thorenial went up and over. The north wall was the highest, but also the least defended. Who would be mad enough to scale a sheer cliff while wearing armor? Kit's grappling hooks, designed by Felix and powered by compressed marrowlight, made it almost easy. I'm gonna be sick, Thorenial gasped as they reached the top. Save it for after. Kit hauled him over the parapet. Which way to the dragon chambers?
Down. Deep down. He oriented himself. There. That tower has the main lift. They ran across rooftops, keeping low. Below, the furnace was boiling with activity. Soldiers rushed to the breach. Commanders screamed orders, and beneath it all, a vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself. The dragons, the Renial said. They're waking them up.
Then we better move faster.
The tower door was locked. Kit solved this by hitting it very hard with her hammer until it wasn't. They descended spiral stairs, past workshops that reeked of alchemy and worse, past barracks where soldiers were still scrambling for weapons.
Intruders!
Someone yelled. Kit's hammer caught him in the chest, sending him through a window.
Subtle approach isn't really working.
Never does. The Renial parried a blade, his bone sword singing. Left here! They fought their way to the lift, a massive platform designed to carry equipment to the deep chambers. Kit slammed the lever, and they descended into darkness that smelled of sulfur and old magic.
So,
she said conversationally as they dropped.
Any last words before we face dragons?
Yes, actually. He pulled off his helmet, face serious. Thank you.
For what?
For showing me that honor isn't about preserving the past. It's about protecting the future. He managed a smile. Even if that future involves hitting things with hammers until they stop being problems.
It's a time-honored human tradition.
The lift shuddered to a halt.
Ready?
No.
Good. That means you're sane.
The doors opened onto hell. The dragon chamber stretched impossibly wide, carved from living rock and reinforced with iron bands thick as tree trunks. 3 shapes dominated the space. Creatures that hurt to look at directly. They were dragons in the way a child's drawing was a portrait. All the right pieces, assembled wrong. Scales of fused bone covered flesh that pulsed with visible veins. Wings made from stretched skin and copper wires sparked with unstable magic. Eyes. Too many eyes. Tracked movement with predatory focus. They were beautiful in the way avalanches were beautiful. Terrible. Inevitable. And standing before them, arms raised in triumph, was Lord Commander Valeth.
The Renial!
His voice echoed with genuine pleasure.
You're just in time for the culmination of centuries of work. Witness the rebirth of Elven supremacy.
Witness the death of Elven honor, the Renial countered, stepping forward. This isn't supremacy, teacher. It's madness.
Madness? Look at them! Dragons, the Renial! The power that once ruled the skies, brought back through superior understanding of flesh and purpose.
Those aren't dragons. They're abominations, wearing dragon shapes.
Just semantics.
Valeth gestured, and one of the creatures raised its head.
They obey. They destroy. What else matters?
Everything else matters. The Renial drew his blade. That's what you never understood. While they argued philosophy, Kit moved. The dragons were chained, massive restraints that held them while final preparations were made. Those chains had anchor points. Anchor points could be broken. She reached the first one before anyone noticed. Her hammer, charged with every bit of power the armor could spare, came down on the chain's mount. Metal screamed. Stone cracked.
Stop her!
Valeth commanded. Furnace soldiers rushed Kit, but she was already moving to the second anchor. Behind her, the Renial intercepted the guards, his blade a silver blur. 3 centuries of training focused into pure, efficient violence.
The command phrases!
He called out. Valeth, the old codes. Do they still work?
You think I'd tell you?
The commander drew his own blade, a masterwork that thrummed with power.
I taught you everything, boy. You can't defeat me. I don't need to defeat you. Thorenial smiled grimly. I just need to distract you. They met in the center of the chamber, teacher and student, past and future. Valeth was technically superior, but Thorenial had something his teacher lacked. He'd learned to fight alongside humans, to be unpredictable, to cheat. Kit smashed the second anchor and moved for the third. The dragon it held turned its head, too many angles, too many eyes, and spoke.
Little hammerer,
It said in a voice like grinding stone.
why do you break our chains?
She froze. They weren't supposed to talk. Lysander's intelligence said they were beasts, not beings. Because, she said carefully, things that can think deserve to choose. The dragon considered this.
We were made to obey. Choice was not included in our making.
Yeah, well, I'm human. We tend to break things that weren't included. She hefted her hammer. Wanna be free? All three dragons turned to look at her. The weight of their attention was like standing under an avalanche, waiting for it to fall.
Free.
One said, tasting the word.
Free means consequences.
Another warned.
Free means hunting those who bound us.
The third concluded. Works for me, Kit said, and she brought her hammer down on the final anchor. The explosion of released energy threw her back. The dragons rose, chains falling away like shed skin. Valeth's face went from triumph to horror as he realized what had happened. The command phrases! He screamed. Clash more Draconis! Vilhamdor! One dragon's tail caught him mid-phrase, sending him into a wall with bone-crushing force. The ancient words meant nothing to creatures who'd been built outside tradition's constraints. Run! Thorenial grabbed Kit, pulling her toward the lift. They're not controllable. That was kind of the point. Behind them, the dragons were exploring their freedom in ways that involved a lot of fire and screaming. Furnace soldiers tried to respond, but weapons meant for rebels were useless against creatures of living nightmare. The lift was too slow. Kit could hear the dragons moving, testing wings that sparked and crackled with unstable magic. Any moment they'd realize the chamber had an exit. The shaft, Thorenial said. We climb. In full armor? Are you mad? Look where we are and ask that again. They climbed, muscles burning, armor scraping against stone, up and up, while below them dragons learned what it meant to be unbound. Kit's enhanced strength was the only thing that kept her moving. Thorenial climbed with desperate efficiency, calling on every lesson the royal guard had beaten into him. They emerged into chaos. The furnace was burning. Felix's charges had done their work, collapsing whole sections. Bone Rights and allies fought desperate holding actions while civilians fled. And rising from the depths, the dragons came. They were wrong in every way that mattered. Too many limbs, wings that bent reality around them, breath that wasn't quite fire but something worse, raw magic that unmade what it touched. But they flew, and that was terrible enough. Scatter! Hollis's voice cut through the panic. Don't group up! Make 'em work for it! The first dragon, the one that had spoken to Kit, swept low over the battlefield. Its breath washed over a squad of furnace soldiers, and they simply ceased. Not burned, not frozen, just gone, like ink washed from a page. The wards! Morwen commanded. The daughters raised their hands, and green light bloomed. Where dragon breath met forest magic, both energies screamed and neutralized. Barely. We can't hold them, the eldest called. These things are antithetical to life itself. The second dragon landed among the fleeing furnace troops, and Kit realized with sick horror that it was feeding, not on flesh, on the magic in their bones, their weapons, their armor,
growing stronger with each consumption. "We need to go," Thorenial said. "Now, while they're distracted." "We can't just leave them." "We can't fight them. Kit, we broke their chains, but we can't control what they do with freedom." She wanted to argue, but he was right. The dragons weren't allies. They were forces of nature pointed in roughly the right direction. For now. "Fall back!" Hollis commanded. "All teams, fall back to the ridge!" They ran, bone rights and allies, enemies, united in fleeing something that was worse than each other. Behind them, the pale furnace died in dragon fire and impossible magic. The Moonwell Valley, sacred ground of the Elven people, became a pyre for their ambitions. From the ridge, they watched the destruction. The dragons, glutted on magic, finally took to the skies properly. One went north, toward the Elven heartland. One went east toward human kingdoms. One circled back and spoke in that grinding voice.
Little Hammerer, you gave us choice. We choose to hunt those who would chain us. All of them, everywhere.
Then, it was gone, leaving only smoke and ruin, and the terrible knowledge of what they'd unleashed. "Well," Kit said eventually, "we stopped the demonstration." "By creating something worse," Thorenial said hollowly. "Maybe. Or maybe we created something necessary." She pulled off her helmet, hair plastered with sweat and soot. "The world was breaking anyway. At least now it's breaking in a new direction." Hollis approached, supporting a wounded Felix. "The furnace is gone. Most of the furnace soldiers, too. We lost..." She paused, calculating. 30? 40? It's too many. "But we won," someone said. "Did we?" Thorenial looked at the burning valley. "We replaced one nightmare with 3. "No," Kit said firmly. "We replaced controlled nightmares with free ones. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." She met his gaze. "Because free things can choose to be better. Controlled things can only obey." Epilogue. 6 months later. The tavern in Millhaven was nothing special. Rough wooden tables, rougher clientele, and ale that could strip paint. But it was neutral ground, which made it perfect for the kind of meetings that shaped the new world. Kit sat at a corner table, her bone armor replaced with practical leathers. Across from her, Ambassador Thorenial, he'd refused the title of prince, wore similar attire. Between them, a map covered in markers showed the changed world. "The Northern Dragon established a lair in the Frost Peaks," Thorenial reported. "It's been hunting Titan remnants efficiently. Also displaced about 6,000 mountain folk. We're dealing with the worst refugee crisis in decades." "The Eastern one?" "Claimed the ruins of Drakmor, which was our major trade hub. Its hoard includes half the region's bridges. The economy's in shambles." "And, the third?" "Still wandering. Latest reports put it near the sunken cities." He paused. "Where it flies, reality, it bends. The land twists. 3 cities have had to be evacuated because their wells started flowing upward." Kit traced patterns on the map. "So, we traded controlled monsters for uncontrolled ones that are remaking the world. Still better than the alternative." "The nobility wouldn't agree. Neither would the refugees." "The nobility can stuff it," she grimaced. "The refugees, that's on us to fix." "Former nobility," he corrected. The Bone Right Accord saw to that, along with establishing the Dragon Response Coalition, the refugee assistance programs, the reality stabilization research. "Felix thinks he can synthesize something to counteract the warping. Eventually."
Felix thinks he can synthesize bone marrow too. Eventually. The Renial smiled tiredly. We've traded one apocalypse for 3 ongoing disasters.
Manageable disasters, Kit insisted. That's the human way. Break the big, impossible problem into smaller, possible ones.
The Accords, the treaty that ended the old world and began the new. Elven bone armor was now regulated, not forbidden. The technology shared freely between peoples. No more furnaces, no more titans, no more trying to chain power that shouldn't be chained.
Hollis wants you to speak at the memorial,
Kit said. For the fallen. What would I say? Sorry we unleashed dragons, but at least they're eating the right people.
How about we faced the worst of ourselves and chose to be better?
She reached across the table, taking his hand.
That's what she taught me. Honor isn't about preserving the past.
It's about protecting the future, he finished. Even when that future has dragons in it.
Especially then!
They sat in comfortable silence. 2 warriors who'd learned that sometimes the best victory was the one that left everyone equally uncomfortable. Outside, the world rebuilt itself from bones and broken dreams. Not perfect, not pure, but free to choose its own shape. In the distance, a dragon's cry echoed across the mountains. Not a roar of conquest, but something almost like laughter. The sound of power unchained, making its own way. Kit raised her mug.
To the bone rights. To the living and the dead.
The Renial clinked his mug against hers. And to the future, whatever shape it takes. They drank, and the world moved on, carried by human ingenuity and elven sacrifice, and the wild hope that freedom, however dangerous, was better than chains. In the end, the dragons were right about one thing. Choice always came with consequences. But then again, that's what made it choice.